This is the meat trapper here. Just a quick tip for you. If you get started in trapping, one of the things that you're going to be working with a lot is wire. Lots and lots of wire. In trapping, you're going to be dealing with several different gauges of wire. You'll be dealing with 16 gauge wire some of the time. 14 gauge wire is pretty common. 11 gauge wire is used, and number 9 gauge wire is used a lot, or at least I use it a lot. Now, wire comes in two different size rolls, basically a 3.5 pound roll and a 10 pound roll. And these are two 3.5 pound rolls. This is a 11 gauge wire, this is a 9 gauge wire. And of course, the smaller the gauge, the more feet you're going to have on the roll. But the gauge wire you use depends upon the particular use that you have in mind. 16 gauge wire is a really light gauge wire, and I really don't recommend anybody use that to secure their traps or even support their snares. It's just a good general purpose wire to keep things together. 14 gauge wire I use from time to time to support my snares. 11 gauge wire is a little bit heavier duty, and I really don't use that much. I use a lot of 9 gauge wire, primarily as snare supports. This is my primary snare support. And when I'm out in the field trapping for a day, or if I'm out in my boat, I rarely need an entire roll of wire, and that can take up space. It gets tangled up. Once you start uncoiling your wire, it sort of uncoils, and it can quickly become a tangled mess, especially if you have a couple of different rolls, different gauges. You don't want to carry 10 pounds of wire when you're only going to need a couple dozen feet of it to do what you need to do. So I'm one of those people that I like things organized, and I hate tangled messes. And so I came up with a little way to keep the wire organized. So one of the solutions I came up with to keep from having a tangled mess of wire, and to keep from having to carry 3 or 4 rolls of wire around at all times, is I'll just take a stake and I'll put different gauge wire and wrap it around the stake. On this particular stake, I've got 16 gauge and 14 gauge wire. And you can see I just peel off a couple of dozen feet, wrap it around, and this is real easy to carry. I can throw it in the boat, throw it in a pack, throw it in a bucket, and I've got multiple types of wire. I just reel it off. It doesn't get tangled up, doesn't get hung up, and I'm not having to carry an entire roll when I only need 40 or 50 feet for a day's work. So this is just a quick tip on staying organized and having the supplies that you need when you need them without having to carry 10 or 15 pounds of wire around in your pack.